Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Lee Price. Making his comic book debut as Venom in Volume 3, Lee Price had a pretty rough life, before the symbiote stuff even. He was bullied, his father was horrible to him and his mother, so he burned the place down to the ground. Which is not a great way of handling the situation, but comic books, you know, what are you gonna do? He blamed the fire on a mutant boy with pyrokinesis, and when he grew up, he suppressed all of it. He actually believed down the road that his father had abandoned him and that the fire was actually caused by the mutant. He was in protective services after that point, and as an adult, he would join the Army Rangers, until he was injured in a mine explosion, which in turn left him without a few squad members and a few fingers. Discharged and left without any benefits, Lee had no choice but to accept a job from Mac Gargan to be a tough guy while the deal goes down between Black Cat's gang and Tombstone's gang. That's when he found the symbiote, or rather, the symbiote found him. Number 9. Ultimate Venom. Venom of Earth 1610, aka the Ultimate Universe, made his first appearance in Ultimate Spider-Man 33. Now the Ultimates are great for the most part. We see these major changes to the heroes we thought we knew, like Thor for example isn't a god this time around. Gwen becomes Carnage, and Wanda and her bro, they're close. They're closer than the other version, that's for sure. In this tale, Richard Parker and Eddie Brock Sr. were working together to develop a way to heal humanity. The symbiotic biosuit named Project Venom was underway. The project was adding up to be more than a two-man job, so they partnered up with Trask Industries for some help. The company eventually realized the potential of the symbiote and figured, let's just use it as a bioweapon and create super soldiers. Sounds good, let's do it. That ought to do something, right? Well, it did do something. When Richard and Eddie were on a plane to fight Trask in court, see, they had secretly created their own version and wanted to pull it out to prove ownership. But Eddie pulled the suit out a little bit too early while they were still flying, and that's how they all perished in the Ultimate Universe. As a student, Eddie Jr. began studying a sample of that same Venom project with Dr. Kurt Connors, and Peter took a piece to study himself. After Peter spilled a drop on his hand, he got the black suit makeover, cranking his powers up to 10. He was now untouchable, but when a robber shot another man, this triggered Peter. It reminded him of his Uncle Ben and what happened, so he went full Venom. He made an absolute mess. He lost the symbiote after getting entangled in electric cables on purpose. He wanted this thing to go. The only parts left were in his bloodstream, and also that other sample left at the lab, which yes, Eddie Jr. ended up finding. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. If not, still give it a thumbs up and still give us more chances. I don't know, back to the list. Number 8, Demon. Coming in hot from Earth 5101, Pavitar Prabhakar made his first appearance in Spider-Man India, issue 1. Pavitar moved to Mumbai with his Aunt Maya and Uncle Bim to continue studying. He got half a scholarship and was determined to keep the success train going. His best and only friend, MJ, Mira Jane, stood by his side all the while. He got his powers through an ancient ritual, which in my opinion is way cooler than a spider biting your hand mid-photo, you know? Nalan Oberoi, a crime lord of this alternate reality, used an amulet to get himself possessed by a demon. That demon was determined to hold the door open for other demonic forces. Pavitar, while being chased by bullies, ran into an ancient yogi who then gave him the powers of a spider. Which sounds great, but when you find out that this reality's Venom is a century-old demon stuck in an amulet, you get a little bit nervous for him. Demon Venom was freed by a cult called the Neo-Alvers, and once he was free, nearby towns were just obliterated. You know the rest. He had us in the name Demon, let's be honest here. Number 7, She-Venom. Anne Wang, aka She-Venom, will be returning in Venom Let There Be Carnage. Michelle Williams is set to return, of course, and she's been around in comics for a while. She first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man issue 375 back in 1993. She first met Eddie while at Empire State University, and she actually fell in love with him quite fast because, you know, he saved her life from a group of thugs. That ought to do it. So they get married, Eddie starts working for the Daily Globe, she was a lawyer, and everything sounds like a pretty fantastic household if you ask me. You know, until Venom Dark Origin issue 2, when she divorced Eddie after getting sick of his Spidey hatred. Once Eddie got the symbiote, Spider-Man asked for Anne's help. Any hot tips, favorite driving ranges? Come on, help a brother out here. So she explained some of his history and it did help. Spider-Man was able to meet up with him in issue 375 of The Amazing Spider-Man. But Anne followed in the background as well. She wanted to talk to Eddie and talk him down down from this vendetta. Things were actually starting to cool off for a bit, and then these idiots show up to take everybody in. That doesn't happen, obviously. Instead, Anne is put in danger and Spider-Man helps Eddie save her, and then the two webheads make a deal. Later on in Venom Sinner Takes All issue 2, Anne was shot by the third Sin Eater and was bleeding internally. It wasn't looking good. Venom carried her away to a secret hideout, and the only way she could survive was if the symbiote attached itself and healed her, thus creating She-Venom. Number 6. ANTI-VENOM. When Eddie Brock and the symbiote did separate, you would think that would be the end of it, or something good at least. Well, in fact, without the symbiote, Eddie has to now live with cancer, which sucks, but he spent his days volunteering at the Feast Center, so he's trying. Something's happening, he's trying to make good. Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, used his powers to cure Eddie's cancer. Just Eddie? Like, I feel like there's a lot of other people we could help out, but okay. But in doing so, Lee accidentally infused the symbiote into Eddie's bloodstream, so the symbiote was fused into his white blood cells. In the Amazing Spider-Man issue 569, Anti-Venom is now born. It's just Venom with the opposite colors, essentially, with the white blood cells added in there. This version of the symbiote has phenomenal healing powers, as you would guess. It can create antibodies that cures any known disease or any impurities with your body. Now, the main difference between Venom and Anti-Venom is that Eddie Brock is now in full control. He's got two hands on the wheel this time around, and the symbiote lasted a few years in the comics, and in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 671 it was destroyed when it was used to cure the spider virus. Number 5. GWENOM. Hitting the page for the first time in Spider-Gwen Volume 2, issue 25, GWENOM, well, you can probably guess. Gwen Stacy turns to the dark side after she sees her father beaten into a coma from Rhino. Thing is, Matt Murdock gave the order. Yikes. She's out for blood, and this symbiote will make it a lot easier to shed it. But not if Frank Castle gets to them first. He actually killed Rhino right as GWENOM was gearing up to do it. Probably for the best that it didn't happen. She's actually out for everybody at this time, because then she breaks into the S.H.I.E.L.D. correctional facility to confront Cindy Moon, and she asks Cindy why she made this mutant spider in the first place. Cindy sees that she's upset, but she doesn't blame the symbiote. She knows that these are Gwen's words and thoughts, the symbiote is just shouting them. Cindy implores Gwen to let go of her anger towards Matt Murdock, which is easier said than done. Number 4. Venom 2099. Cron Stone, the older half-brother of Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099, first entered comics in Punisher 2099. But 3 years later in Spider-Man 2099 issue 35, he becomes Venom. How did this happen? You're literally in the Spider family. What went wrong? Well, Cron was a bully. He was actually so horrible as a person that Miguel once tried to take him out, before all this jazz. So Cron gave the orders to try and have Jake Gallows and his family wiped out, but Gallows found out and beat Cron to the punch. So while he was laying there in a sewer after a knife wound, this black ball of goop suddenly brushed up against him and then engulfed him. The symbiote was different this time around though. See, it had acidic blood and saliva to help get the job done. Cron can also turn his body into a liquid. The guy can literally shapeshift, so of course Venom 2099 is on this list. Number 3. May Parker. Venom strikes the Parker family again, this time on Earth 9997. May Parker is quite unique when it comes to superpowers. In Jim Krueger's Earth X run from 1999, instead of keeping them a secret, she actually embraced it. I am Iron Man style, which is how I think I would handle powers, but realistically, I'm afraid of heights. I would retire in 5 business days tops. Matt Murdock trained her to use her spider sense like radar, and things were going well, until she became the target of a symbiote. That same symbiote that had been used by her father years before. See, Peter rejected the symbiote at first, so now it was a little upset, and it swore revenge on the Parkers. Any Parker. Doesn't matter what age, what generation. Venom doesn't take too kindly to rejection, so one day it left an older Eddie Brock and made its way to May. Thing is, when the symbiote did bond to May, her spider sense training came in handy and she was able to subjugate the symbiote and take control. Nice. This is why we all need a crime-fighting blind lawyer for guidance. Is it too hard to ask for? Number 2. Scorpion Venom. Matt Gargan was a private investigator hired by J. Jonah Jameson to find out just exactly how Peter gets those angles on the webhead. How does he get those TikToks? What is he doing? How does he get those boomerangs? They're always so good. Something's gotta be up, but every time Mac would get close, Peter's spider sense would tip him off and he would easily avoid him. It was kind of comical almost. So step 2 was, let's just pay Mac 10 grand and have him be the subject of an experiment involving animal mutations doctor Harley Sitwell. Then maybe we'll figure out how a wide lens works, perhaps. I don't know, that might be the trick. Obviously things go south, Mac becomes the villain Scorpion. Later on in comics during Marvel Knights, Scorpion was recruited by Norman Osborn and was sent to kidnap Aunt May, if anything were to happen to Osborn. Hey, if you don't get a text back, go steal that kid's aunt. Awesome, freaks. So whilst on the way to take Aunt May, the recently freed Venom symbiote felt this shared hatred towards Peter Parker, and the two bonded, creating Scorpion Venom. Just the absolute worst. You never want to bump into this guy. And finally, number 1. The Punisher. With the Disney What If series launching off this past week, I think it's only fair to include one of my favorite what if scenarios, also the goriest. This one comes from What If series volume 2, issue 44. Here we find the Venom symbiote taking over Frank Castle rather than Eddie Brock. Now I thought the Punisher was frightening before this. Oh boy. This was the most people the Punisher has ever in his life. You've been warned. This is a pretty brutal time. The symbiote can shoot webs, and in Frank Castle fashion, an unlimited amount of bullets also comes in handy. The symbiote tried to take over Frank's body, but Frank vowed to end his own life if that was the case. So the symbiote's like, damn it, alright, fine, fair. Kicking off the list at number 10, Aaliyah Bell. Making her first appearance in Venom 2099, issue 1, Aaliyah Bell started her superpowered days on a tragic note, as most of these are. She was in a car crash that ended up taking the life of her mother. She was raised afterwards by her father, Theo Bell, and Aaliyah was having a hard time at school. Some students were bullying her because of the scars on her arm from that crash. So yeah, those kids are awful. Don't be like those kids. Thanks. Next, Aaliyah was selected to go under this experimental treatment developed by Alchemax scientist Dr. Russell. But as you would guess, being on this list, the experiment went south. During this treatment, she saw these visions of an ancient dark god. All these humans bunched up together, all these voices. It was just eternal darkness. But after the treatment, her arm was back to normal, which was her main goal here. But when a bully came forward to try and mess with her the next day, a black tendril reached out of her hand and cut off the Alchemax monitoring bracelet. So something's fishy here. She started to then hear an evil voice in her head, so she ran home and literally tried to wash the symbiote off like a bad henna tattoo. Alchemax was planning on turning her into a super soldier the whole time. That was their secret evil plan. The symbiote and Aaliyah ended up relating to each other, and a new Venom was born. Their first plan of attack was to infiltrate Alchemax and get the rest of the symbiote, not just the arm part. Once Venom was whole again, Aaliyah made it agree to not kill anymore, and instead be a hero with her. A hero that's Scar's childhood bullies named Bether. And before we continue on with this list of alternate versions of Venom, if you want to go ahead and give that video a thumbs up, that would help us a lot. It really goes miles for us here at Top 10 Nerd. You're so sweet. Back to the list. Number 9. X-23. Coming from Edge of Venomverse, this alternate version of the symbiote might be the scariest. Yeah, Laura was born in a lab from the DNA of one James Howlett. She was cloned and alone all of her life, trying multiple times to escape, but still there was no luck. The guards were always ready for her. That is until a goopy solution was bestowed upon her. Her claw cracked open a glass panel that released the Venom symbiote, and the next page we see X-23 out and about trying to talk the symbiote out of eating some of the others who live nearby. Now they don't eat those kids, but when a thug comes along asking those kids for money that they owe, Venom Laura stops him real quick. Says people getting hurt makes them sick, and then 7 pages later they absolutely annihilate more guards in public. We love it. Number 8. Fashion Venom. Venom with a twist, or rather, Venom with a hip twist. The Marvel Age miniseries Spider-Man and Power Pack. This was a 4-parter released in 1984. We have Alex, Julie, Jack, and Katie Power. They're these adorable young kids, each got their powers after a chameleon named Whitey passed his powers onto them. He'd separated all of his abilities into the 4 of them. Kind of like the Fantastic Four, except with more boogers. The miniseries kicks off with Spider-Man thanking the pack for helping him stop Sandman earlier. He thanks the children by getting them VIP tickets to New York Fashion Week, because that's something kids enjoy, apparently. Much better than Legoland, I guess. Little vacay on Spider-Man, we'd love to see it. Now cut to a fashion designer rushing to work. He gets bumped, spills coffee everywhere, his fancy new fabric is ruined, so he's probably ruined as well. That guy that bumped into him just happened to be Venom. Spider-Man swoops in, handles him right quick with a sonic blaster, gets the symbiote right off of him, but where did that symbiote go? That designer got his glittery hands on the suit, and New York Fashion Week wasn't ready for the newest, hottest trend. He introduced this new fabric, so versatile it can change your appearance. Wow, if you want to wear jorts, then all of a sudden you want to wear not jorts. There you go, buy this stuff. Peter just happens to be there snapping pics of MJ, getting those angles, when all of a sudden, those dazzling dresses turn deadly. Turns out the solution of the day is bad European techno music at full volume. That's the solution for most things in life, realistically. Number 7, Venom Thing. Coming from Earth 51838, making his first horrible appearance in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 304, Benjamin Grimm became the head guard of a prison for superhumans, of course under the commands of President Harry Osborn. While he was there, that's when he came into close contact with a symbiote and became this absolute unit. Look at this thing. The Resistance came in and had to go toe-to-toe with Venom thing. That's the scariest thing I can imagine. Literally, the scariest thing I can imagine. Out of all the alternate versions, this guy has to be the most haunting. I mean, even before the Venom symbiote actually came into contact with him, I wouldn't want to fight Ben Grimm in any prison on any day. So we have to include him. I mean, look at him, come on. Number 6, Ngozi. Ngozi was a track star. She began her comic run in Venomverse War Stories issue 1. She was an outstanding athlete and an amazing person in general until she was involved in a horrible bus crash in which paralyzed her from the waist down. Again, another tragic start to this version. Really heartbreaking premises are coming in for part 2, wow. She was outside one day trying to catch a grasshopper for her bug collection. Her hobbies, of course, were turned down a notch. She was a little slower, but still nonetheless she was outside enjoying life regardless. That's when the symbiote and her crossed paths, changing her life forever. The symbiote beforehand had been evading the grasp of Rhino, but when Black Panther was killed in that battle, Ngozi convinced the symbiote to work with her instead, in order to protect the civilians of Lagos. The Dora Milaje saw all this unfold and they were impressed with the young lady. They saw courage in her, so they recruited her into their ranks and also into Wakanda, where she would then get another life-changing upgrade into that of the new Black Panther. Not too shabby. Number 5, Hawkeye. While Clint may have evaded the symbiote's grasp in Old Man Hawkeye, he wasn't too lucky in the alternate reality of Earth 32323. That sounds so stupid. I just keep saying it for like 4 minutes, I'm like, hell. Beginning with Civil War Volume 2, Issue 2, Clint came into contact with it right after the death of Mac Gargan, who we broke down in Part 1, which if you haven't seen, you can watch it after, it's cool, you can do it out of order, we won't tell anyone. After that, Venom Clint was recruited by Peter Parker in order to infiltrate the Iron. The Iron was Tony's war zone, this was right after Civil War. So Peter recruited Clint in order to steal supplies for Beast to finish his weapon project, so he agreed, but upon landing the group was attacked by Stark Sentinels, and Elektra ended up losing her life. Now the reason Clint got this symbiote in the first place is still unknown, but it's said to be potentially traumatic, as are most things involving the symbiote. Number 4, KINGPIN Venom. Wilson Fisk, straight out of Earth TRN 421. He appeared in the 100th anniversary special of Spider-Man issue 1 back in 2014. You would think Kingpin obtaining the symbiote for more power would be enough to make you feel sick, but he also had to upgrade it as well, which is what makes this version so unique, and I had to include it here. He added techno-organic improvements to the symbiote that gave him access to any and all tech on the planet. You better check those recently deleted photos before going to a dinner party with Wilson Fisk. When Eddie Brock and Peter Parker were duking it out, they both came to the conclusion that the symbiote should just, you know what, be destroyed. It's not helping either party, let's just get rid of it. Great deal. Goopy fist bump. But that's when Kingpin came along and kidnapped both of them, and then he got the symbiote. And honestly, Kingpin Venom, when he's chasing Peter down, he's like controlling tech and using it against him. I can see this being a pretty stressful situation for Peter, but somehow he managed to escape by luring him into the woods and then starting a forest fire. Usually I would advise against forest fires, but it's Venom we're talking about, so burn it. Burn it all. Get rid of him. Number 3, Don Fortunato. Quite an unfortunato story if you ask me. No, really, it's actually quite tragic. Back in 2005, Marvel wanted to reboot Venom, so the new Venom host was now Don Fortunato after he won the symbiote in an auction. Hey, you want a car or you want a life-changing goop that's gonna kill your family? He gave the suit to his son Angelo to make him more tough, I guess. See, Eddie warned about the risks, but Angelo didn't listen. Angelo attacked Spider-Man and ripped out his heart, only to discover, oops, that was just an imposter, because costumes are a thing that exist in real life. And after a fight with the Spider-Man, Angelo left out of fear. Venom wasn't a fan of this because he's like, oh, you're leaving, I don't like you, you're kind of weak. So he left the host, he left him mid-air. Spider-Man would have swooped down and saved him, but his gear wasn't working properly after the fight he just had with Angelo. You played yourself. Number 2, Old Man Logan. We had Laura on the list earlier, so we gotta throw Logan in there too. Of course! Coming from the edge of Venomverse issue 4, we see Logan get captured by Angel, Spider-Girl, and Hulk Jr. when all of a sudden he's eaten by a T-Rex, the same T-Rex that was venomized in the original Old Man Logan story. Now considering the fact that Logan was eaten by the Hulk in that story and then ended up ripping his way out, we gotta think he's probably gonna be okay after this. And he is okay, in fact he's better than ever. The symbiote ended up bonding with Logan inside of the dinosaur, giving us a pretty fun issue. He rips his way through the dinosaur and tears his enemies apart. At one point, we're even given a glimpse of Venom Captain America, but we'll save him for another list. And finally, number 1, Agent Venom. Flash Thompson first appeared in Amazing Fantasy issue 15 back in the early 60s, and since his first introduction as a classmate to Peter Parker, he's seen quite a bit of change. First starting out as a bully, and by the time he left college he was joining the military stationed in Southeast Asia, but he didn't stick around for too long. The American forces just destroyed this beautiful temple that they found, and Flash was having no part of it. It's like Avatar, especially after meeting the lovely Shashan who healed him. He was like, guys, don't do this, let's just go home. But he went home. He returned to America and needed Spider-Man's assistance because the survivors of that hidden temple were now after him because they blamed Flash. Flash didn't become suspicious of Peter Parker being the webhead until much later, in issue 135 in fact. By the time we get to Amazing Spider-Man 574, Flash had returned to the battlefield, this time in Iraq, but he lost both of his legs. When he returned, Shashan was able to help rehabilitate him. Things changed dramatically for Flash when he was enlisted into Project Rebirth 2.0. The government had acquired the Venom symbiote after Mac Gargan's arrest following the siege of Asgard. We break down Mac in part 1 of this list, so you haven't checked that out yet, you know what to do once this is over. So now Flash has legs again. How lovely is that? And Spider-Man abilities, just to top that off. His first task made him enemies with the new jack-o'-lantern. Honestly, I feel quite bad for Flash. Most see him as a bully. He had a terrible father, he got kidnapped by Dr. Doom because he dressed like Spider-Man one day, and he's got terrible luck. Number 10, Deadpool. We'll kick this list off on a messy, red, bloody good note. Two red guys slashing each other up, both are kind of insane. Let's talk about it. Deadpool vs. Carnage 2014. Right, so after Cletus Cassidy escaped a prison, the Merc with a mouth was the only one crazy enough to track him down. In order to track down a maniac, you kind of low-key have to be one. You gotta think like them, right? Wade thinks he can figure him out, and he also thinks that a rocket launcher can take down Carnage. Kind of a fool if you ask me. I mean, in all fairness, fire and sound waves, they work, but it's Carnage we're talking about, a little bit stronger than our Venom guy. Wade gets a closer look, and although he likes guns, swords, and the occasional weed whacker, he thinks one of his grenades ought to do something. One of the many that he has hidden in crevices and places that we don't talk about. And it does, for a page. Carnage lays there, sans head for a moment or two, but backup arrives in the form of Shriek. Deadpool then gets his ass handed to him, and Wade gets impaled over and over and over again, with the last hit practically being the size of a tree just going through his body. Horrible. And then in the end, Deadpool needed a symbiote upgrade himself just to keep the fight fair. Number 9, Spider-Man. Of course we have to talk about Spider-Man getting his ass whooped as well. It's no surprise that Peter is on the top of Carnage's naughty list, and in Carnage, It's a Wonderful Life, Dr. Kafka and Security Chief Jameson get a glimpse inside Carnage's mind, and it's literally just a room full of Spider-Man being tortured. That's all he thinks about, just different versions of him being tortured in different horrible ways. I think about like candy corn and stuff, I don't know, I guess I'm normal. The guy's twisted. Even in his head, his actions are brutal, but daydreaming aside, when Carnage does get his real life hands on Spider-Man, it's so much worse. The Ultimate Comics introduced Carnage in Ultimate Spider-Man 61, and just one issue later, Carnage figured out the best way to hurt Spider-Man was to attack his heart, like Willem Dafoe yelled in the first Spider-Man movie. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up just to get some good spirits involved, you know, get it kind of out of the grim, dark tone that we're sticking with for most of this, that would be great. It helps our studio out quite a bit. You guys are awesome. Let's get right back to this list. Number 8, Man-Wolf. In Volume 2 of Carnage, Issue 2, Special Agent Claire Dixon of the FBI assembled this task force to try and hopefully put an end to Carnage's madness. She has Eddie Brock to help out, but this time around he's the host of the Toxin Symbiote, and together they use a woman named Manuela Calderon as bait to bring out Cletus. See, she was the only survivor from his last rendezvous, and by rendezvous I mean massacre. Honestly, I wouldn't agree to that. Kudos to her, it's pretty brave. So she lured him into a mine shaft and then successfully cornered and trapped Carnage. Now what? The task force is also trapped in there with a man named John Jameson, but John's not around at the moment. No, instead Cletus now has to deal with the Man-Wolf. Must have been a full moon tonight. A lot of fur, a lot of blood laying around after this one. They're just throwing each other around this mine shaft. It's pretty grim. They're smashing their heads into rocks. It's kind of cool. The fact that it's a werewolf fighting Carnage, I mean, you either love it or you don't. Things suddenly take a turn when Carnage grabs that gemstone around John's neck, the stone that allows him to become Man-Wolf in the first place, and after that he turns back into a regular naked dude. He's dizzy, he's exhausted, and he's in, of course, immense pain. He lost his footing and then after fell from a cliff. He was so close to taking him down, but you know, had to go turn into a wolf. Classic. Did you know Jupiter has 52 moons? If you were a werewolf on Jupiter, you'd be so busy. Number 7. Silver Surfer. In the Amazing Spider-Man issue 430, once again Cletus was running around the city just attacking bystanders, throwing desks, giving people a finger, just anything horrible, being the worst ever. Luckily, the Silver Surfer was in the cosmic neighborhood and got to offer a helping silver hand to Spider-Man. The symbiote sees the Silver Surfer and it's intrigued, so much so that it leaves Cletus naked again on the street in order to bond with Silver Surfer. He sees all that power and he's like, I'll take some of that, please. He then becomes Carnage Cosmic, and I gotta admit, he looks pretty sweet. In terms of hosts, that's a pretty high bar to set right there. Silver Surfer ended up handling him, getting him out, but honestly, I'm kind of disappointed. Carnage on a surfboard, it's pretty intriguing. Sign me out. Number 6. Ghost Rider. Alejandra Jones first appeared in Marvel Comics in Ghost Rider Volume 7. She was sold as a child and ended up in Nicaragua, where she trained in a temple to solely become the next Ghost Rider. When absolute carnage goes down, she's trying to now protect her village, but things get crazy when Carnage rips out her spine and then eats it. Now, normally that would be the end of it. Like, that's enough to be, considered a beatdown, an awful beatdown. And for Jones, that was the end of it, but when Carnage ate that spirit spine, he now obtained the spirit of vengeance temporarily, which is just ultimate madness. I kind of like the way he looks though. I mean, completely evil and spine eating aside. I like it. Number 5, the Mercury team. The more fighters we have, the better chance we have, right? When the US Army put together a task force called the Mercury team, they thought they had a chance because each member was a soldier from a unique military branch. And also, they each got to use a symbiote for select missions. That ought to help out a little bit. Like say when Carnage is loose in Colorado, time to call these guys in. The 4 symbiotes they use are Lasher, Phage, Agony, and Riot. And yes, they also have a symbiote attack dog, which is just amazing. Still cute. Goopy, but cute. When they aren't being manned, they're to remain on ice, just waiting to be used again. They sound like the only chance to win here, but when Carnage finds their secret base first, with all those frozen suits and symbiotes, well, what's the point after that? This was the last we see of the team, obviously, but those 4 symbiotes bonding with Wade, you gotta admit, that's a pretty great deal. Number 4, Nova. One day you're skateboarding, looking for your missing father, and then all of a sudden you fall off your board and wake up to Rocket Raccoon and Gamora. Those classic days. Yep, the duo wake him up and say they're also looking for his father and his black Nova helmet. So now this kid takes up the Nova title, works with the Avengers, the New Warriors, and the Champions, completely stepped up to bat. He was 15 only, kid was killing it. And in the Avengers X-Men Axis storyline, our heroes and villains switch sides. Their moral compass completely flips. So afterwards, when Carnage goes back to psycho mode, he needs to now soak up more evil. He's got to make up and remind himself who he is. So he goes to Sam's school and then makes a mess there. Horrible. Those poor kids. Nova fights him off, but the fight is more of a tie than anything. They just both kind of do this. Nova's not, and he's not looking too good here. Number 3, Venom. Okay, we're finally seeing Venom and Carnage go at it on the big screen next month. Hopefully, I'm fully convinced Woody Harrelson is going to steal the show. I'm so excited, but how will the fight end? In the comics, Venom and Carnage have had some serious blowouts. Will Venom eat Carnage like a midnight snack? Will Spider-Man have to come in and take Venom's side, singing Strangers in the Night, of course, while they do it? The beatdowns go back and forth for Venom and Carnage for the most part, but one of the best storylines for me was, of course, Absolute Carnage. Carnage's connection to Knull makes him this godly version of himself, and he gets beat so hard in the first issue that Venom is the one to suggest leaving. He's like, hey, I can fix you, but we have to leave like now, like ASAP Rocky, we gotta go. Number 2, Miles, Human Torch, and more. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 7099, we see Red Goblin on the cover. The lovely combo comes to life when Osborn gets his hands on the Carnage symbiote. In their first battle, Spider-Man lost, but afterwards Peter called forward some help, some backup. He had the assistance this time around of Miles Morales, Human Torch, Clash, and Silk. Usually the Human Torch would be enough to get some damage done, but with both villains now with their powers combined for Red Goblin, it was much harder. It was almost useless to blast fire at him. They all got their butts handed to them. Nobody was prepared for this level of power. But luckily, ANTI-VENOM came in to throw some hands back because Red Goblin was seconds away from finishing all of them off. Even after Flash had healed them, they didn't spring back up and start kicking people in the neck again. They were down for the count. It wasn't looking good. They were no longer a formidable team at all. And finally, number 1, the Avengers. Speaking of teams getting their ass kicked, somebody as big and as bad as Carnage, who else to call but Earth's mightiest? In Carnage USA, Carnage has the ability to create clones of himself. Now he can use multiple hosts, and he takes over a town at one point. It's really stressful. The team heads to the town to figure out a solution, so we got Spider-Man, Cap, Logan, The Thing, and Hawkeye. Everybody ends up getting the symbiote treatment, resulting in one of the coolest but scariest situations ever. Spider-Man tried to warn the team, but they did their Avengers thing and rushed in as a group to kick some ass. Oops, everybody gets hit except for, you guessed it, Spider-Man. So now it's up to Peter to save the entire team of Avengers in Carnage USA. What a ride, you must check it out. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Ben Reilly. Created by Peter Parker's DNA, Ben Reilly is a Spider-Man clone created by the Jackal. He first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 149. Issue 410 shows us a much different version of Ben though. Carnage makes his way to this underground club. It's pretty fun, it's jazzy, everybody's dressed like a supervillain, so naturally everybody loves Carnage. They're like, wow, cool outfit, love the claws, very realistic, we love it. Ben and Carnage fight it out, they throw each other through walls, all that good stuff, but when Ben gets too close, the symbiote decides to move over to the sticky side. Number 9, Scarlet Spider. During Minimum Carnage, Cletus Cassidy had returned to try and steal something from a NASA research center, but Scarlet Spider Kane Parker was there to save the day. He hasn't seen Carnage in years, but now he is ready. Mid-monologue, Kane leaps over and breaks Carnage's neck. He just turns it all the way around, just a 180. Bad times. Now of course this does absolutely nothing as Carnage turns his head right back and freaks out Kane, rightfully so, and then he stabs him with one of his tendrils. Carnage escapes using a Prometheus pit, with Kane swearing that he's going to kill Carnage for what he's done. Are you sure about that, Kane? He kinda just got stabbed with a tendril, so I don't know. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up on the video, it does help us quite a bit. You're awesome. Thank you so much for your support. Now, before wasting any more time, let's get right back into this list. Number 8, Gwen Stacy. She first appeared in Ultimate Spider-Man 14. She's the daughter of Captain John Stacy, and her and Peter get close when Gwen straight up pulls a knife on a classmate who was bullying Parker. She's pretty wild in the Ultimates, as are most of our characters. She's pretty conflicted as well. I mean, her mother ran off with this random dude. She feels totally depressed because of it, and would stop by Peter's house to talk, vent, talk things out. Her father died when he was killed by a burglar dressed as Spider-Man, so she lives with Peter and May now. It actually causes Peter and MJ to break up temporarily. It's kind of a little romantic rift. A little bit of a love triangle, a lot of drama going on in that household. Very Big Brother vibes. But she learned eventually that Peter was Spider-Man, and she was upset, but she understood, even making peace with MJ along the way, so things are going fine. And after all that pain and agony and stress, later that night, after telling MJ not to worry about them, she was then killed by Carnage, who was looking for Peter. Peter felt bad here, obviously, because he had allowed Connors to use his genetic material to experiment on in the first place. If you know Peter Parker, you're pretty much doomed, so if you see anyone doing any of this, just don't be friends with them. Number 7, Iron Man. Carnage 2010 issue 1 kicks off with Tony getting flipped off at a medical supply expo by Michael Hall. He's showing off a prosthetic arm that is controlled by a chip in his mind, so he's having an annoying start to the night, you could say that. But then he sees Doppelganger chasing an armored truck and sedan. This guy never gets a break. Okay, cut to issue 3, he faces an even crazier webbed monster. So Spider-Man volunteers to go after Carnage first, claiming that he at least knows the symbiote, but on the other hand, Tony is literally a walking tank. So Carnage grows wings and flies off. He doesn't even swing yet. But then he finds a window and attacks Carnage, and in the final issue, he pulls out the big guns, literally pulls out everything he has. Even with the added ammunition, Iron Man is getting slammed down over and over and over again. His suit is at 35% integrity, even tipping him off that catastrophic failure is imminent. Well, you can't win this time with words, Tony. You just need more guns, apparently. Number 6, GWENOM. King in Black GWENOM vs. Carnage. We meet Earth 65's version of Mary Jane, much more of a redhead this time around, you could say. Gwen met MJ in grade 6. They made a band called the Mary Janes, and sometimes Gwen had to skip jam sessions to go and fight the lizard. So MJ felt sad. She felt like her best friend was bailing on this dream of being a famous band and touring the world. Their friendship is really put to the test when Knull took over MJ and was named after the last Psycho, Carnage. She was made into a literal monster and her only goal was to get the symbiote from Gwen and then take it back for Knull to study. Carnage is great this time around. I mean, MJ turns an electric guitar into a battle axe. It's fun. The action looks beautiful. I could watch these two fight for hours. Things take a turn when Gwen comes face to face with Knull himself. Carnage continues to overpower GWENOM, even leaving unscathed. Gwen and Carnage meet up once again, but it's at Madison Square Garden this time around because Carnage is now making her own band. It takes a rock off in order to free MJ, but the first couple of fights here easily go to MJ's Carnage. Number 5. Scorn. Scorn first appeared in Carnage issue 5. Michael Hall used the symbiote, combined it with technology, so now you can create and control limbs, like the guy I mentioned earlier. Sounds pretty remarkable. Amputees had a solution now, which is awesome, but the solution was the Carnage symbiote in a way, so of course it all went south. The symbiote escaped its containment cell and bonded to Tanis Neves and used her to rescue Cletus Cassidy. But that symbiote was taken from Shriek, so when Knives was close to Shriek, she reached out and a new symbiote was born. Hashtag Scorn. Scorn linked up with the Mercury team in Carnage USA to stop Carnage from taking over a town in Colorado. I mentioned that story in part 1 of this list. But in Web of Venom, Carnage Born, Scorn and its host became a cult leader, dedicating their time to retrieving the corpse of Cletus Cassidy, who the cult viewed as Knull's prophet or whatever. Scorn resurrected Carnage with a sample of the symbiote, and as soon as he arrived, Scorn was, well, he was no longer needed at that point, which is sad, but that's the harsh reality of it. That's why you don't become a villain, guys. It's just, you're gonna get used. Number 4. Agent Anti-Venom. Go Down Swinging was written by Dan Slott. It's a 4-part storyline that kicks off with Norman Osborn finding a new power. Yeah, he finds the Carnage symbiote, well, steals it rather, from an abandoned S.H.I.E.L.D. warehouse, and when it bonds with Norman, the agenda of course changes. Now he's the Red Goblin, and now he wants to do nothing else but kill. So Flash Thompson, Anti-Venom, rescues J. Jonah Jameson from being kidnapped, and when Peter goes head to head with the Goblin, he wins. Yeah, surprisingly, he even says some last words as well. He thanks Peter for pushing him this entire time, being the drive that he needed, because a man is only as good as his enemies. Okay, interesting, Peter won, this is great. We can start clapping, I think, yeah? Peter says he wished he could have saved Norman, and then he starts to laugh. Yeah, Norman starts to laugh, his blood starts to move around as well. This is all just a lie, it's all a bit. Red Goblin is born. Basically you got Carnage now with pumpkin bobs. It's pretty messy and terrifying. Anti-Venom was forced to save his friends or kill the Goblin, so he died a hero. His suit was barely attached anymore at that point, but Flash still stuck by Peter's side until the last moment. Number 3, Miles Morales. In Absolute Carnage, Eddie and Dylan are trying to lay low, but Carnage pushing them in front of a train changed that vibe up real quick. Carnage is literally seconds away from ending Brock, but that third rail held him off just a touch longer. Eddie knows at this point that Carnage is still alive, that electric shock therapy didn't really do much, but they used that time to get out of there instead of asking questions. Fair. While catching up with Spider-Man trying to think of a plan here, the news showed this massive gravesite that was just discovered. So Carnage is trying to find everybody who once was a host for the symbiote in order to obtain their codices. Now this Carnage cult was responsible for the mass graves, and in the next issue, Carnage now has this dark army with him, this horde. He's much more powerful than ever, living in the spire underneath the streets of New York. So comfortable. His rent's probably so high. When Carnage is about to take over the Scorpion, Miles jumps in to save the day, punching Carnage's head right off of his body for a moment, and then he goes and then comes back, but it's still cool. But a moment is all he gets in this fight, as the next page we see Miles fall under Dark Carnage's control. Number 2, Wolverine. In Spider-Man and X-Men issue 3, we see Wolverine go toe-to-toe with Carnage. It's a nice fun 90s crossover. Wolverine is still rocking the bone claws, which is cool, until, you know, Carnage eats them. Carnage likes the taste. I mean, to be fair, it's probably good for you, it's probably healthy. Pages later, Wolverine strikes again, and it's a fun time because Carnage is like, what the hell, I thought I literally just ate those things on your hand, what's going on? Well, Carnage, you now have an unlimited snack. Just keep Logan around and you're all set. And finally, number 1, Captain America and Co. During the Maximum Carnage event in part 11 out of 14, other superheroes team up to try and stop this maniac. We've heard about him just annihilating people for 2 lists now, so yeah, it takes a lot to come in. Captain America, Firestar, Iron Fist, and Deathlock all head to New York City. They're fighting Doppelganger, Shriek, it's pretty amazing. Even Cloak and Dagger get in on this plan in Maximum Carnage. It's a huge event. Everybody ends up losing to Carnage and his gang though. It's wild. So the fighting is more so left to Venom and Spider-Man, but we have to mention the rest of these guys, especially to close out a part 2. They did a lot of the heavy lifting and they got punched in the face quite a bit during this whole story. I think at the end of the day, we just need to avoid Cletus Cassidy in any form, in any story. I'll say that.